I'm Kelly Hill Ross, and thanks for tuning in to another show. Today's show is all about your rights as an employee regarding the COVID-19 virus when you return to work. Have you thought about that? First, let's think about it. Do you have to let your employer know if you did or did not get the vaccine? Can your employer fire you if you don't get the vaccine? Do you have any rights at all? Well, Hennither Gant, president of the Greater Baltimore chapter of the American Association for African Americans in Human Resources, had a lot to say about your rights. So get your cup of coffee, tea, or favorite beverage, and sit down and relax, and let's listen to what she had to say.
Historically, there were many challenges that were facing African Americans in human resources. Those issues being, how do I advance my career? What are some of the pitfalls that I need to really be aware of that may be inhibiting my career advancement? And what support groups or support personnel that's out there that I can call on that may give me some tips to solve those issues or really just let me air those issues out. In 1998, we were meeting in Orlando, and 12 of us decided after that particular meeting we needed to go national. And those 12 represented 12 different cities that had an organization in their own, but they weren't connected to a national. And by the 12 coming together over a year, we decided and we were committed to forming a national organization to address those issues facing African Americans in human resources on a senior level, on a mid-level, and also on an entry level. So they would have support and recognition of what those issues are, and then we could come up with solutions possibly to answer and help them further their career. So in 1998, the idea was created. In 1999, it became a reality of the National Association of African Americans in Human Resources.
One of the things I think is that's really unique about NTripleHR is our focus on partnerships and our partnerships with corporations throughout the country. One of the things that we do extremely well is developing candidates from a professional development standpoint, our national conferences, providing those with continuing educational benefits and credits as well for their learnings throughout the year. And what that affords us is being able to really provide our corporate partners with a very strong, competitive, diverse pipeline of candidates, not only from the entry level, but also at the executive level as well. And so we're really excited to partner with those organizations who are interested in really diversifying their pipeline of candidates.
So I'm at the MBA, and I've spent 15 years within NTripleHR at multiple different companies. I think for future HR professionals, this is a great opportunity for the MBA to be able to tap into the network of professionals that are out there.
I think it's important to have a platform like NTripleHR, one, because of the main subject, HR, stands for human resources. So in today's business environment, HR, human capital, people is the big differentiator. And so to have an organization that focuses on sort of best practices, skill development for people that have dedicated their profession to human resources, I think is critical. And so when I think about my business, Holland America Line is a cruise business. And so we focus on human capital and that touch between an employee and a guest. And so each and every day I'm thinking about what are the things that I can do to maximize the impact of the 16,000 employees that make up my company. And in order to do that, I pull on the experiences that I had in human resource.
It's a built-in network. It's a great opportunity to grow and build your career. It's access to professionals that have been in this business for many years, all the way from the most senior down to the person that you would consider to be your peer. It's the greatest opportunity for people at all different spectrums on that continuum to be able to interact with those that are just like them and those that they aspire to be like.
As we look forward to the future, it's never been brighter. We started out nationally. We're looking at now the whole global society. So we're looking at it from an international scope. Our membership has always been open, but now we're seeing interest from overseas, so that changes our even perspective of our membership. We're also seeing a need now to develop leaders, and that's why we're instituting our National Association Leadership Institute. We're revamping our website to include digital things, webinars, and all. So when we look at our mission, our leadership, and in our technology, we're really becoming the organization of the future.
You are a hiring strategist. You're in human resources. You have created a program called Good in Baltimore, which highlights individuals and organizations that are doing great work in and around the city of Baltimore. And you specialize in HR for startup businesses. You're also head of the National Association of, finish me out on that.
National Association for African Americans in Human Resources, the Greater Baltimore chapter. I know, say that 3 times.
Yes. So I thought I'd let you say it instead of me saying it.
That was a good one.
And also, you're an outstanding leadership. You received the Outstanding Leadership Award for Human Resources for the Greater Baltimore chapter. And also, I see here Woman of Power Media Solutions. So you're busy. You're a woman on the go. So I'm not going to take a whole lot of time to go over all your many accomplishments, but I'm going to start right in because the purpose of us meeting today is I became concerned about when individuals go back to work, what are their rights now that COVID has been here and we've had this pandemic. And I just saw on the news today where one of the universities, they are requiring that all of their students, if they're coming back on campus, they have to have had, been vaccinated with COVID. So my first question to you is this changing employees' rights?
Absolutely. So one of the things I will say is that COVID is changing so many employment laws. If you know anything about the employment law landscape, you know that on a quarterly basis, there could be a new employment law anyway. So adding COVID on top of that, it's just a whole nother layer. So back in 2020, there were a lot of employee rights, and there's still some, but they're not making it mandatory anymore. So I'll explain in just a second. So, for example, if you were an employee and you, for some reason, contracted COVID-19, became positive as a result of COVID-19, there was a federal mandated thing, law rather, across the U.S. that said employers that met these certain requirements, if you pay an employee because of them being ill or out of work, we will reimburse you. Again, I'm not going to get into the accounting piece of that, but that was a great thing because employees didn't feel like they had to, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to, my rent if I'm sick. They can actually be sick and try to be well for once. Without having to have that concern. Well, that law was called FFCRA, right? In January of this year, the federal government said, hey, we're going to continue it, but we're no longer going to make it mandatory. So you all know what happens when you don't make things mandatory. It becomes optional and nobody's going to want to do it. So that's exactly where we are right now, where employers are saying, hey, if you are in fact ill, you can take off, but we're not paying you. Just imagine that sentence. So talk about employee rights. I wanted to start there, right, when we talk about employee rights. And then now, as we talk about now the vaccination, there's so many different vaccinations that have, been out here in the market. And there are employers that are saying, hey, you know what, you can't come back here. If you test positive, or even if you don't test positive before we return to work, we want to make sure that all of our employees are vaccinated. Well, employees are having to really choose to say, hey, if I don't get vaccinated, I may lose my livelihood. If I don't choose to get vaccinated, I could lose my job and health insurance and all of these other things that are tied to the job. So to answer your question, absolutely, employee rights are definitely changing. They were already changing, but they're changing even faster now.
Wow, that's interesting. So at this point, are you saying that employees have to notify their employer if they did or did not take the vaccine? Do you think it's going to be mandatory?
It will be. I definitely think that it will be for a majority of the industry. Right now, they're just kind of rolling it out. So what is happening is that you have government agencies as well as big corporate professional associations that are strongly suggesting that employers make it mandatory for their employees to get vaccinated. So how it's done, how the employer is notified, what I've seen is that there's some best practices, but again, there's no real law about that yet. But if you talk to me 6 months from now, I guarantee you there will definitely be some type of law pertaining to that. But right now, it's really on a company by company basis because there's no real mandate yet say that an employee must notify the employer of the vaccination unless the company is saying that that is their policy. So if the company comes out and says, hey, we have a policy that says, hey, employees must have vaccination and you have to let me know, blah, 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 just like any other policy, that's when it will take into effect and it would apply. But if the company has not made that as a policy or hasn't communicated that, then it's still kind of up in the air.
So what you're saying is it's up to the company. They can make it policy, but what if you work there and you say, but I'm not going to take the vaccine, even though I've worked for you for years. Now you're going to say, oh, I have to go get this vaccine. Do I have the right to go sue, or what happens then?
That's a great question. Suing was an option last year, and then the administration was like, no, you can't sue your employer because of this. So there's a whole lot of stuff going back and forth in terms of suing. There aren't enough real life cases to talk about the suing, but I will talk about the rights in terms of, can you say, no, I don't want to? So again, I can't put it any simpler than this. Unless you have some type of religious reason or disability, medical disability as your justification to not taking the vaccination, if your employer is saying that you need to be vaccinated to work here and that's their policy, I mean, the bottom line is, are you going to play the game or not?
Right.
So really what I've seen is that, guidance is coming out literally on a daily basis. But what I've seen is that there are some of the employers that have been making it mandatory or strongly suggested, is what we like to say sometimes in HR. Some of those reasons why employees would not take it is because of the religious reasons, or again, some type of medical disability, something saying, some doctor's note saying that, you can't take the vaccination.
So what about in the workplace where it isn't mandatory, but I'm going to work, I've had the vaccine, you're sitting next to me and you haven't had the vaccine. Can I go to my employer and say, I don't want to sit next to her or him because they haven't been vaccinated and I have?
We are expecting
it's going to happen there.
Yeah.
Should I go to HR and say, I don't want to sit next to that person? Can they designate areas for vaccinated and non-vaccinated employees?
It is about to get just that ugly. To be quite honest, there aren't too many best practices that surround that just yet, but I can imagine employees wanting to go directly to HR because a decision like that, you have to make sure that it's not a discriminatory decision. So the person that's sitting next to you doesn't necessarily have to disclose to you whether or not they did get their vaccination. So there's so many nuances that will go into play, in that type of example, because someone's sitting next to you, and so suppose they disclose that they don't want to get the vaccination, but you don't know that there was a religious reason, right? Mm-hmm. So if that is a concern of anybody watching, as an employee, the first place you want to go is HR, because more than likely there's a company-wide thing that has to take place, and HR has to do a number of things, including their due diligence, just to make sure that, number one, they are following the law and making sure that what they do for one person, they're going to do for everyone. And that's what makes this so difficult, because it's not mandatory on a federal level yet.
Okay, so what about government employees? I know if someone works for the government, they shut half of the government down, and they had a number of people they were on furlough for a couple of days and then worked a couple of days, and they've been told to wear a mask. Some people have disappeared, and then they came back, and they don't know whether or not they had the virus or what. Some didn't come back at all, and nobody's saying anything to them. So are federal employees exempt from policy, or are they going to have issues too? Or do they have any rights?
Yeah, they are definitely. I know lots of government and federal government and state government employees. And in fact, they definitely have rights. It just, it's all depending on if you're covered by the union or not. Anyway, that's another story for another day. But what that particular example that you just shared is very common, whether in the public sector or private sector, because when you, if somebody, you mentioned, I love that you said that they disappeared and they came back, and it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Right. More chances than not, that person probably was excused because of a positive COVID-related matter, COVID test. But legally, you cannot disclose the name of another employee who has contracted COVID-19. So they kind of have to keep it hush-hush, even though the writing's on the wall. It's only 10 of y'all in the office. You probably know what happened. And it just so happened they were gone for 14 days. You over there marking a calendar. Oh, I know it must be, right? I don't mean, by all means, I don't mean to make fun of it. I'm trying to bring fun rather to a rather serious matter. But, it's just such a delicate matter, because, there are some individuals that don't mind sharing, like, oh, yeah, I had it. But there are some folks that are like, I don't want to share, and I don't want you knowing my business. I'm doing me. But from an HR company perspective, they should not be sharing, legally, should not be sharing any details about who tested positive, who didn't test positive. Now, but I will add this caveat. Even though they can't share the name of the individual, they should be sharing with that particular group of coworkers or employees that may have been impacted. They should be sharing and say, hey, this person, not this person, but they should be sharing and say, hey, you know what? There was someone that you've come in contact with over the last X amount of days, and we would like you to also quarantine or to go get tested, so on and so forth. So that should be some type of communication, to be quite honest. I have gotten plenty of calls, though, from employees saying that their employers are not notifying them at all. They're just letting people, knowing that they've been within 6 feet of them, and they're just letting them continue to go back to work, not saying a thing. So that is just, I can't stand to hear situations like that. But the proper thing to do, the right thing to do, is for the employer to share that somebody has been in your proximity that is tested positive for COVID-19.
Okay. So, in essence, if you work for a large corporation or a small corporation, if it is policy or not policy, as an employee, I guess you should double up on your mask and keep your mouth shut, take your temperature, and just go to work and pray that you don't come in contact with someone who, could be a carrier. And I think it's going to be a very sticky situation. So, are people like yourself, are y'all being coached on what to do once the population and the workforce comes back full force? Is there anything that's being said as to what y'all should do and shouldn't do, or what to expect? Are they preparing y'all for the influx of what's going to come?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Which is why it's so important that hopefully for those of you watching, but I don't mean this to belittle people at all when I state this comment, but I'm just praying that you have an organization that has competent HR professionals. And I'm saying that because the laws and the best practices are changing so much that if you are not an ongoing learner, if you're going off for guidance from 2020, you are behind the curve. If you're not looking up things literally on a weekly basis, you're really behind the curve. And then for those employees that are working for organizations that don't have HR, where people are just kind of going on Google, I'm thinking about like your smaller employers. I'm really concerned about that demographic because there's nobody there that's dedicated to looking at best practices for return to work. So I'm very concerned about those particular segments of employers. But in terms of best practices for returning to work, some of the things that some of the trainings and law firms that I've been talking to, there's a number of things that we have to keep in mind. So obviously everyone knows about making sure that you have hand sanitizers everywhere. Has to be everywhere, and you want to make sure that you have posters saying to wash your hands, making sure that you're wearing a mask. I don't see us not wearing a mask for a very long time. I'm not a medical officer, but I just don't see that happening. And then you want to keep in mind too that this is also allergy season. Just a whole number of things. But there are some employers, in terms of a best practice, that are purchasing employer masks for employees. That's one best practice that I've seen, because masks are so different. And, you really want to make sure that your mask is covering your nose, going all the way to your chin, and sealed around here. And I've seen it. People walking around their mask, underneath their nose.
Uh-huh. I saw the mask was up here, but their mouth was out and it was over their nose.
I'm telling you, I went to the store. The lady was talking to someone else, and I guess the conversation just got so good. She pulled the mask down. Can you understand what I'm saying? I was like, she was hearing you with the mask on. But anyway, so because of that, that is one of the best practices. So that way it can be just standardized across the board. So you don't have to worry about this person having a mask, that not being the right mask. So that's definitely something that I've seen as a best practice. Also, the social distancing within office spaces, especially for those of us that are working in an office setting, man, there's just so many different things with that. They're also talking about splitting up shifts. So if you were working in and talking about government, I don't know what they're going to do. Because, there's so many cubicles. Yes. Most government agencies are cubicle centric. So, it's hard to be 6 feet away. And then they are talking about putting shields up. Some government agencies are already putting shields up. And but here's the logical side of me. You put up a shield, but there's still space up here.
Right, exactly.
So I honestly, just logically speaking, I don't understand that piece, but that is a best practice for employers to have shields. And again, working. So instead of you having 20 people working on one floor or in one particular area, they may split it up where 7 people come to work Monday and Tuesday, another 5 people come to work Thursday and Friday. And then another best practice that we've been learning about is to make sure that you have some cleaning companies in your Rolodex, because we've been getting a lot of information in the HR profession about what to do, about how to rush employees back to work. But there isn't a lot of information on what to do when you get an outbreak at work.
That's right. So then what do you
There's not a lot of conversation about this. So that's where I've been purposefully trying to educate my clients on, to say, hey, you can go on Google and they'll give you 100 solutions, so to speak, on how to get your employees back to work. But you want to keep in mind what are your processes and your practices when an employee does test positive. Because if you keep rushing people back in to enclosed areas, and most government buildings don't even have windows.
Yes, the windows
right?
were made not to open. Yes.
Exactly right. So, I mean, there's just so many different things to take into consideration, but I would really focus the attention, especially from an employee perspective. So before you go back to work, if your employer is talking about going back to work, make sure you ask some critical questions, not just about, mask wearing, sanitizers. We know, turn on the TV. We know that alone is not going to stop you from getting COVID-19. But what are some of the other practices that they put in place to make sure that not just you, but making sure that there won't be a widespread epidemic in the workplace, right? So definitely some things to consider for employers bringing employees back to the workforce.
Okay, so I guess in essence, if it's a small company and you have access to an HR person, you can connect with them to ask them, certain questions, what should I do? Or I guess they should be setting up meetings to, when the employees come back, to say, okay, this is the drill. If this happens, you do this. If this happens, you do that. So hopefully, the information that you've given us, will help people to understand that there are going to be some issues once they go back to work, and you need to know your rights, and you need to think first and not fly off the handle. A lot of people get angry if you tell them to wear their mask, or if the mask isn't on right. And I've had people say, I can't breathe, with the mask on. Do a little bit of homework if you're interested in going back to your job, if you've been furloughed, just to find out just what is going to happen, what your company's policies may be. So in closing, is there anything else that you would like to suggest to people who, are going to be going back to work?
Yeah, I'm definitely, I don't mean this to be cliche at all, but definitely stay prayed up. Stay prayed up. I'm not saying to be scared, to be fearful of anything, but ask questions. And I would strongly encourage employees to be your own ambassador. Don't wait for someone else to provide you with information. This is not the season to wait for someone to give you what you need, if that makes any sense. You want to be proactive and making sure that you are doing what's best for you and your family, because there are decisions being made right now on the Hill, and there will be lots more decisions that are going to be happening that you might not even know about, and your employer might not even know about. So it's very important to just make sure you do that due diligence, and just to research as much as you can and talk to the right people, and try your best not to go off of your feelings. Feelings are temporary, but talk to someone that knows a little bit about what's happening so you can make an educated decision.
Okay. Well, I really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's good information, and we appreciate it. And I thank you.
Well, what do you think? Are you prepared now to return to work? You know what to do and who to go to ask questions. If you like our show, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or go to our website, thekellyhillrawshow.com. You can email us with comments at thekellyhillrawshow@gmail.com. So until the next time, stay safe and God bless. See ya.